A man who could buy cities dismisses the woman pouring his water. He's on the phone, barking in broken Italian, his billion-dollar deal crumbling with every mispronounced word. His world is frantic, loud, and collapsing. Her world is silent, watchful, and patient. He slams his fist on the table, snarling at his translator, and then at her, the waitress. "Do you even understand this?" He scoffs, gesturing at his chaos. In that moment, the quietest person in the room is about to become the most powerful. He thought he was judging a waitress. He was about to be saved by a scholar. The clatter of silverware on porcelain was the baseline rhythm of Vivian Davies's life. It was a soundtrack of survival, each clink a tiny countdown to the end of another grueling 10-hour shift at Trattoria del Ponte. The upscale Soho restaurant was a world of performance. The guests performed wealth, the chefs performed artistry, and Kate, well, she performed invisibility. Her job was to be a ghost with a water pitcher, a silent entity that anticipated needs without ever imposing her presence. Tonight the performance was strained, the August air thick and unforgiving. Even in the air-conditioned dining room seemed to magnify every sound, every tension. And the epicenter of that tension was table 7. Adrian Crossley did not dine. He held court. He wasn't a man who occupied a chair so much as conquered it. He was tech royalty, a titan of industry, whose face was a regular feature on business magazines, always with a headline that included the word disruptor. At 38, he had the sharp, restless energy of a predator, with eyes the color of a stormy sea that seemed to be constantly calculating, assessing, and more often than not, dismissing. He was flanked by 2 lieutenants in impeccably tailored suits who looked as if they'd been surgically attached to their phones. They nodded when he spoke, laughed a fraction of a second too late at his jokes, and maintained expressions of rapt attention even when he was just chewing his bread. The table was a mess of documents, 3 laptops and a flurry of hand gestures. They weren't having dinner. They were waging war. Kate had approached the table 3 times, the first to take their order, which Adrian had given without making eye contact, waving a dismissive hand as if shooing a fly. The second to deliver their appetizers, which sat growing cold as he paced beside the table, shouting into his phone. The third time was to refill their water, a task she performed with the practiced stealth of a cat burglar. His voice was a sonic boom in the carefully curated ambience of the restaurant. "No, no, no, Alessandro. You're not listening. The legacy clause is non-negotiable. Non-negotiabile. Do you understand?" He was speaking Italian, or rather, a brutal, mangled version of it. It was the Italian of a man who had memorized a phrase book on a private jet, all harsh consonants and misplaced confidence. It was an assault on the language Kate loved, the language she had spent years perfecting, the language of Dante and Petrarch, the language that whispered the secrets of Renaissance art history, her hidden, dormant passion. She could feel a familiar ache behind her ribs. It was the ache of her double life. By day, or rather by night, she was Kate the waitress, earning minimum wage, plus whatever scraps of tips were left by men like Adrian Crossley. But in the quiet, stolen hours of the morning, she was Vivian Davies, a PhD candidate on an involuntary hiatus from Columbia University. Her dissertation, The Medici Patronage and the Language of Power in Florentine Art, sat gathering dust in her cramped apartment, a monument to a life postponed. The reason for the postponement was a small, fiercely loved boy named Leo, her 12-year-old brother. A cystic fibrosis diagnosis had shattered their world 2 years ago, and the mounting medical bills had become an insurmountable wall. Her parents were gone, leaving her as Leo's sole guardian. So she'd traded the hushed halls of the university library for the clamor of the trattoria. Every dollar she earned went to nebulizers medication and the looming threat of another hospital stay. The dissertation could wait. Leo couldn't. "Signore," Kate said softly, her voice barely a whisper, as she approached the table again. "Your entrees are ready. Would you like me to have the kitchen hold them?" Adrian didn't even turn. He held up a finger, his focus entirely on his phone. "Alessandro, for the last time, tell your father that the offer is final. Finale. We acquire 70%, or there is no deal. Nessun accordo." He was practically spitting the words. On the other end of the line, a faint, elegant Italian voice could be heard, tinny and distant. Kate, with her trained ear, could pick out phrases. "Un insulto alla nostra storia. An insult to our history. Questa non è la maniera. This is not the way." Adrian's face was turning a dangerous shade of red. He snapped his fingers in the air, not looking at Kate, but at his associate to the left, a nervous-looking man named Peterson. "Get David on the line, now. My translator is useless." Peterson fumbled with his own phone. Mr. Crossley, David is in the London office. It's 2 a.m. there." "Do I look like I care what time it is in London?" Adrian roared, causing a hush to fall over the nearby tables. Diners stared their forks frozen mid-air. The manager, a perpetually stressed man named Mr. Dubois, began to drift nervously in their direction. Adrian ended his call with a frustrated groan and threw his phone onto the table where it skidded perilously close to a water glass. He finally looked at Kate, but it wasn't a look of recognition. It was a look of pure, unadulterated annoyance, as if her very existence was an inconvenience. "You. My steak. Where is it?" he demanded. "As I said, sir, it's ready. I can bring it out immediately," Kate replied, her voice remaining steady despite the tremor of anger she felt. It wasn't just his rudeness. It was the butchering of that beautiful language. It was the arrogant assumption that money could bypass the need for respect, for understanding, for the simple grace of trying to meet someone on their own terms. "Fine. Whatever. Just bring it," he muttered, turning his attention back to his laptop, his brow furrowed in concentration. Kate retreated to the kitchen, her hands clenched into fists. She took a deep breath, the scent of garlic and basil doing little to calm her. She was used to difficult customers, but Adrian Crossley was different. He wasn't just demanding. He was a walking embodiment of everything that felt wrong with the world, a world where a man could have so much, yet possess so little grace, while she who understood the nuances of a 15th century fresco had to beg for the privilege of serving him. She brought out the plates, placing them silently on the table. Adrian's filet mignon, a perfect medium rare, lay untouched. Peterson's phone buzzed. "It's David, sir," Peterson whispered, holding the phone out like a holy relic. Adrian snatched it. "David, finally. I've got Alessandro Bacelli on the other line. His father is about to torpedo a $900 million acquisition because he thinks I'm insulting his family's legacy. I need you to translate, and I need you to be good." He conferenced the calls. The next few minutes were excruciating for Kate to overhear as she pretended to tidy a nearby station. The new translator David was clearly half asleep. His Italian was passable, but clumsy textbook, learned without any feel for the rhythm or the culture. He translated Adrian's blunt, American corporate speak, literally stripping it of any potential for diplomacy. "Adrian, tell them the offer is more than generous." David, in stilted Italian, lui dice che l'offerta è più che generosa. The translation was technically correct, but in a negotiation with a proud old-world Florentine family, like the Bacelli, it sounded arrogant, like a command, not a discussion. Alessandro's voice came back sharper this time. Kate could hear him say, Generosa ci sta comprando l'anima, non solo l'azienda. Generous. He is buying our soul, not just our company. David the translator stumbled. He says you're buying his soul. Adrian threw his hands up in exasperation. What the hell does that even mean? It's a leather goods company, not the Sistine Chapel. Tell him the soul isn't in the term sheet. Tell him to focus on the numbers. The disastrous translation continued. Adrian grew more agitated, his voice rising, his fists clenching. He was a master of the hostile takeover in English, but in this arena he was a clumsy amateur, and he knew it. He was losing. The deal for Bocelli, the historic Florentine brand he'd coveted for years, was slipping through his fingers in a haze of bad grammar and cultural illiteracy. Finally, he slammed his hand on the table with a crack that made Kate jump. This is a waste of time, a complete waste of time. He glared at his associates, then at the phone, and then his furious gaze landed on Kate, who was refilling his water glass for the 5th time. She was the nearest, easiest target for his volcanic frustration. He sneered, a cruel twist to his lips. He gestured wildly at the phone, at the documents, at the entire chaotic tableau of his failing enterprise. "What are you even looking at?" He spat at her, his voice dripping with condescension. "Bring me the bill." And another espresso. "Now, what do you even understand, this?" The question hung in the air, thick with contempt. He wasn't asking if she understood his order. He was asking if a person like her, a nameless waitress, could possibly comprehend the magnitude of the world he inhabited, the importance of the business being discussed. It was the ultimate dismissal. A wire snapped inside Kate. It was the exhaustion, the worry for Leo, the years of suppressed ambition, the insult to her language, her passion, her intelligence. It all coalesced into a single point of cold, clear fire. She placed the water pitcher down on the credenza with a soft, deliberate click. She turned to face him, fully, her back straight, her chin up. The invisibility cloak she wore every night dissolved. She looked Adrian Crossley directly in the eye. The dining room, with its low hum of conversation, seemed to fade into the background. There was only table 7 and the storm brewing within it. Her voice, when she spoke, was not the whisper of a waitress. It was clear, measured, and resonant, and it was in flawless, formal Florentine Italian. "Signor Crossley, lei capisce che non sta negoziando il prezzo di un bene, ma il valore di un'eredità. Il problema non è il suo traduttore, è che la sua offerta manca di una cosa fondamentale, il rispetto." Silence. A profound, echoing silence. Peterson's jaw went slack. The other associate stared, his pen frozen over his notepad. Adrian Crossley's stormy eyes widened, the fury draining away to be replaced by a look of utter, unadulterated shock. He stared at the waitress, this ghost who had just spoken, who had just articulated the very heart of his problem with more clarity and elegance than anyone on his multi-million-dollar payroll. Kate held his gaze, her heart hammering against her ribs, a terrifying, exhilarating mix of fear and defiance coursing through her veins. She had just translated her own thoughts for him. "Mr. Crossley, do you understand that you are not negotiating the price of a commodity, but the value of a legacy? The problem isn't your translator. It's that your offer lacks one fundamental thing: respect." The billionaire was for the first time that evening speechless. The silence that followed Vivi's words was a physical entity. It pressed in on them heavier than the humid city air. In that moment, Kate felt a terrifying clarity. She had either just saved her job in the most spectacular way imaginable, or gotten herself fired with a flourish that would be talked about for weeks. There was no in-between. Adrian Crossley continued to stare, his mind visibly rebooting. The sneer was gone, replaced by a complex tapestry of confusion, disbelief, and something else, a flicker of intense analytical curiosity. It was the look he usually reserved for a piece of code that wasn't behaving as expected, an anomaly that demanded explanation. It was Peterson who broke the spell, stammering, I don't... What did she say? Adrian waved a hand to silence him, his eyes never leaving Vivi's face. He leaned forward slowly, his voice low, stripped of its earlier bombast. Say that again. It wasn't a command, it was a request. Kate took a steadying breath. The adrenaline was a cold fire in her veins. She repeated the sentence, her Italian as smooth as polished marble. Ho detto che il problema non è il suo traduttore, ma la sua mancanza di rispetto per l'eredità della famiglia Baccelli. Stanno proteggendo 150 anni di storia. La sua offerta li tratta come se stessero vendendo widget. I said the problem isn't your translator, but your lack of respect for the Baccelli family's legacy. They are protecting 150 years of history. Your offer treats them as if they are selling widgets. She added the last part, the comparison to widgets on instinct. It was a word from his world, a bridge between his tech-driven mindset and their artisanal one. Adrian processed this. He glanced at the phone where the line to Alessandro Baccelli was still open, a silent witness. A dawning comprehension illuminated his features. He wasn't just hearing the translation, he was finally understanding the message. He had been trying to conquer a culture, not acquire a company. He looked back at Kate. Who are you? He asked, the question raw and genuine. Before she could answer, Mr. Dubois, the manager, scurried over his face, pale with anxiety. Mr. Crossley, is everything all right? I am so sorry for any disturbance. Vivian, what is going on? He shot Kate a look of pure panic. Kate opened her mouth to apologize, to smooth things over, but Adrian spoke first. Everything is fine, Dubois. Better than fine. He turned back to Kate. I asked you a question. My name is Vivian Davies, she said simply. And where, he said, gesturing vaguely, did Vivian Davies learn to speak Italian like she was born in the Palazzo Pitti? A ghost of a smile touched Vivi's lips. The Palazzo Pitti was a nerve centre of the Florentine Renaissance, a place she had written thousands of words about. I studied, she said, the understatement hanging in the air, art history, with a focus on the Italian Renaissance. It clicked. The pieces fell into place in Adrian's mind with the speed of a microprocessor. The fluency, the use of the word legacy, the reference to history. This wasn't a waitress. This was a scholar in an apron. His phone buzzed. It was Alessandro Baccelli. Adrian looked at the phone, then at Kate. A wild, desperate, brilliant idea was forming behind his eyes. The kind of high-risk, high-reward gamble that had made him a billionaire. The deal is dying, he said, his voice urgent, businesslike. My translator is an idiot, and I'm about to lose nearly $1 billion because I can't speak their language. Not just the words, but the culture. He looked her straight in the eye. You can. Vivi's heart hammered. Sir, I'm just a waitress. No, you're not, he countered immediately. You're the only person in this room who understands what's happening right now. I need you to get on this call. I need you to fix this. The request was so audacious, so utterly absurd, that Kate almost laughed. I can't. I'm working. Adrian pulled out his wallet. He didn't have cash. Of course he didn't. He pulled out his phone. Instead, his thumbs flying across the screen. What's your full name and bank? No, wait, that's too slow. He looked at Peterson. Do you have cash? Peterson flustered, opened his wallet. Maybe $300, sir. Adrian scoffed. He turned back to Kate, his expression deadly serious. I will pay you $10,000. Right now. for the next 30 minutes of your time. I will wire it to you the second this call is over. $10,000 to translate and advise." $10,000. The number echoed in Vivi's mind. It was more than she made in 3 months of back-breaking work. It was 2 of Leo's specialist appointments. It was a cushion, a safety net, a single beautiful breath of fresh air in the suffocating atmosphere of her debt. It was the cost of a high-end handbag to him. It was a lifeline to her. She thought of Leo, of his labored breathing at night, of the stack of bills on her tiny kitchen table. Fear warred with opportunity. What if she failed? What if she made it worse? Then she thought of Adrian Crossley's smug, dismissive face from 10 minutes ago. She thought of the cold fury she had felt. This wasn't just about the money. It was about proving him and everyone like him wrong. It was about reclaiming a piece of herself. "Okay," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. A slow smile spread across Adrian's face. It was a smile of victory. "Good." He gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Sit." To the stunned Mr. Dubois, he said, "She's with me now. Add her meal to my bill, and her lost wages for the shift. Add another 1,000 to it for your trouble. And bring us coffee. A lot of coffee." Mr. Dubois, looking like he'd just witnessed an alien landing, simply nodded and backed away. Kate slid into the chair, her waitress apron feeling ridiculous against the plush leather. The expensive fabric of the suit worn by the man next to her felt like it belonged to another universe. Adrian pushed his own laptop towards her, along with a legal pad and a pen. "The call is still connected," he said. "Alessandro is waiting. What do I do?" Kate took a moment to compose herself. She closed her eyes, shutting out the restaurant, the curious stares, the sheer insanity of the situation. She became Vivian Davies the scholar. She imagined she was in a seminar dissecting a complex text. She opened her eyes. "First," she said, her voice crisp and authoritative, "you're going to let me speak. Do not interrupt. Second, you need to understand that Signor Bacelli is the patriarch. His son Alessandro may be on the phone, but he is speaking for his father. This is about family honor, not corporate synergy." Adrian nodded his attention, absolute. He was a student now. "I'm going to apologize," Kate continued. "Not for the offer, but for the manner of the discussion. I'm going to acknowledge their history and their value. I'm going to build a bridge. Then, and only then, can you talk business." She took the phone. "This is Vivian," she said into it, her voice calm. She switched to Italian. "Signor Bacelli, sono Vivian Davis. La prego di perdonare l'interruzione e la confusione precedente. La comunicazione è stata imperfetta. Mr. Bacelli. This is Vivian Davis. Please forgive the interruption and the previous confusion. The communication has been imperfect." There was a pause on the other end. Then Alessandro's voice, cautious but intrigued. "Signorina Davies, non la conosco. Lavora per il signor Crossley." "Miss Davies, I do not know you. Do you work for Mr. Crossley?" Kate chose her words carefully. "Lavoro con il signor Crossley per assicurarmi che le sue preoccupazioni siano ascoltate con il rispetto che meritano. Sappiamo che Bacelli non è semplicemente un'azienda, è un tesoro di Firenze. I am working with Mr. Crossley to ensure your concerns are heard with the respect they deserve. We know that Bacelli is not merely a company. It is a treasure of Florence." The shift on the other end of the line was palpable. The use of tesoro di Firenze, treasure of Florence, was a masterstroke. It was a phrase they would use themselves. It showed she understood. Alessandro spoke again, his tone softening considerably. He began to explain in detail the family's concerns. Not about the money, but about the preservation of their artisanal workshops. They feared that Crossley's tech-focused mass-market approach would gut the soul of the company, laying off the master craftsmen who had worked there for generations, men who had been trained by their own fathers. Kate listened intently, taking notes on the legal pad. She translated the key points for Adrian in a low, urgent whisper. They're not worried about the price. They're worried you'll fire their artisans. They see them as family. They want a guarantee that the workshops in the Oltrarno district will be preserved. Adrian's eyes lit up with understanding. That's it. That's the sticking point. He scribbled a note and pushed it to her. Tell them we will invest. Modernize but preserve. A new apprenticeship program. Kate translated the concept, but not his blunt words. She softened it, wrapping it in the language of patronage and legacy she knew so well. She spoke of a renaissance for the workshops of blending modern logistics with timeless craftsmanship. She used Adrian's idea of an apprenticeship program, framing it as a way to honor the masters by ensuring their skills were passed down to a new generation. For 20 minutes, she was a conduit, a bridge between two worlds. She fielded questions, clarified intentions, and diffused tensions. She wasn't just translating words. She was translating meaning, culture, and intent. She was saving his deal. Finally, Alessandro said, Signorina Davis, la sua comprensione è notevole. Forse un incontro di persona a Firenze sarebbe produttivo. Vorrei che lei e il signor Crossley incontraste mio padre. Miss Davis, your understanding is remarkable. Perhaps a face-to-face meeting in Florence would be productive. I would like for you and Mr. Crossley to meet my father. A meeting. In Florence. It was more than Adrian had dared hope for. Minutes ago the deal was dead. Now they had an invitation to the inner sanctum. Kate relayed the invitation, a thrill running through her. They've agreed to a meeting in Florence. They want both of us to be there. Adrian's triumphant grin was dazzling. The call ended with polite farewells. He immediately took his phone, his thumbs a blur. A second later, Vivi's phone buzzed with a notification from her banking app. Instant transfer. Received 10,000 bourgeois. From Crossley Holdings, Inc. She stared at the screen, her breath catching in her throat. It was real. Adrian snapped his laptop shut. His team was staring at them, gobsmacked. Peterson, cancel my morning meetings. Get the jet ready. We're going to Florence. He then looked at Kate. The transactional intensity was gone, replaced by a calm, serious appraisal. That was the most impressive thing I have ever seen in a negotiation, he said simply. 10,000 was an insult. That was $1 million performance. Kate felt a flush creep up her neck. I'm glad I could help. Help? He scoffed lightly. You didn't help. You resurrected it. Now about that meeting in Florence. I need you there. Vivi's mind reeled. Florence. The city of her dreams, the heart of her academic work, but reality came crashing back. Mr. Crossley, I can't. I have a job. I have responsibilities. She thought of Leo. I'll pay you a consulting fee of $50,000 for the trip, he said, without blinking. All expenses covered. First class, everything. $50,000. The number was staggering, unreal. It would cover Leo's medical expenses for an entire year, with enough left over to finally re-enroll at Columbia and finish her dissertation. It was the key to unlocking the life she'd been forced to abandon. And after Florence, he continued leaning in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. If we close this deal, I'm going to offer you a full-time position at Crossley Holdings as Director of Cultural Liaisons, or whatever title you want. Your job will be to make sure I don't walk into rooms and sound like an idiot. You'll have an office, a team, and a salary that will make what I just paid you look like a rounding error." He stood up, towering over her. "I don't find talent like you every day, Miss Davies. In fact, I never have. You have 24 hours to decide. My assistant will be in touch with the details for the trip. Don't be late." He turned to his team. "Let's go." And just like that, they were gone, leaving a wake of stunned silence and the faint scent of expensive cologne. Kate sat alone at the table, a half-eaten plate of filet mignon in front of her, and a $10,000 notification on her phone. She looked around the restaurant. The silverware still clinked. The diners still murmured. Her old world was exactly as she had left it. But she was no longer a part of it. In the space of 30 minutes, Adrian Crossley hadn't just offered her a job. He had offered her back her own life. The transition from the sticky linoleum floors of the Trattoria del Ponte to the plush, cream-colored carpet of a Gulf Stream GE150 was a dizzying lesson in socio-economic physics. 24 hours after her life had been turned upside down, Kate found herself sipping sparkling water from a crystal flute at 40,000 feet, the lights of New York City shrinking to a glittering web below. She had said yes. Of course she had said yes. Arranging care for Leo had been a frantic ballet. Her neighbor, a kind retired nurse named Mrs. Gable, had agreed to stay with him, her worries soothed by a payment that made her eyes water. Kate had packed a small suitcase, her few professional outfits looking woefully inadequate for a meeting with Italian business royalty. Adrian was seated across from her, not lounging, but working with the same ferocious intensity he'd displayed in the restaurant. His laptop was open, a headset, on deep in a call about server farm logistics in Singapore. He had barely spoken to her since she boarded, other than a curt nod and a gesture towards her seat. It was disconcerting. In the restaurant he had needed her. Here, in his natural habitat of sterile luxury and high-stakes commerce, she once again felt like an accessory. The flight to Florence was a blur of understated service from a silent flight attendant, the low hum of the engines and Adrian's relentless work. Kate tried to read the briefing documents he'd provided on Bocelli, a thick binder filled with financial projections and market analysis, but her mind kept drifting. She was flying to the city she had only ever visited through books and archival records. She was about to walk the same streets as the artists and patrons she was writing her dissertation on. It felt like a dream. Upon landing, the dream sharpened into a surreal reality. A black Mercedes S-Class whisked them from the private airfield into the heart of the city. As they crossed the Arno River, the Ponte Vecchio glittering in the late afternoon sun, Kate felt a lump form in her throat. It was all real. The terracotta roofs, the cypress trees, the impossible beauty of it all. Their hotel was less a hotel and more a restored Renaissance palace overlooking the Piazza della Signoria. Vivi's suite was larger than her entire New York apartment, with frescoed ceilings and a balcony that offered a breathtaking view of the Palazzo Vecchio. A bouquet of white lilies sat on a marble table with a note, "Welcome to Florence." C'est bien. The meeting was scheduled for the following morning. That evening, Adrian informed her they would be having dinner with his lead counsel, Robert Finch, who had flown in from London to oversee the legal aspects of the deal. They met in the hotel's Michelin-starred restaurant. Robert Finch was in his late 40s, with a lean, predatory look, a Savile Row suit that fit him like a second skin, and the cold, assessing eyes of a snake. He greeted Adrian with a familiar ease, but looked at Kate as if she were a particularly puzzling stain on the carpet. "So," Finch began after the introductions, a thin, patronizing smile on his lips, "you're the silver-tongued waitress I've been hearing about. Adrian has always been one for unconventional hiring practices. The jab was clear. Kate felt a prickle of annoyance, but kept her expression neutral. I'm here to assist Mr. Crossley with the cultural nuances of the negotiation, Mr. Finch. Ah, the cultural nuances, Finch said, drawing out the words mockingly. And here I was thinking a $900 million offer spoke a universal language. Adrian surprisingly cut him off. Robert Vivis' insights are the only reason we're sitting in this city right now, instead of back in New York with a dead deal. She understands the Bocelli family in a way our reports and analyses never could. Listen to her. Finch's smile tightened. He had clearly positioned himself as Adrian's most trusted advisor, and Vivis' sudden appearance was a threat to his standing. The rest of the dinner was a tense affair. Finch dominated the conversation, discussing legal boilerplate and risk mitigation strategies, peppering his speech with jargon designed to exclude Kate. He treated her not as a colleague, but as a temporary curiosity, a mascot Adrian had picked up on a whim. Kate, however, spent the dinner listening. She listened to Finch's dismissive tone when he spoke of the Bocelli's quaint workshops. She listened to his focus on stripping assets and maximizing short-term ROI. He was the embodiment of everything the Bocelli family feared. He was the serpent in their garden, and he didn't even know it. Later that night, unable to sleep, Kate walked out onto her balcony. The Florentine air was cool and smelled of stone and history. Adrian was on the adjacent balcony, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, staring out at the illuminated statues in the piazza below. He doesn't like me, Kate said, breaking the silence. Adrian didn't turn. Finch doesn't like anyone he can't control or bill by the hour. Don't worry about him. He's going to be a problem in the meeting, she said. The way he talks, it's exactly the kind of corporate aggression that will offend Signor Bocelli. He's your David, the clumsy translator, but in a $3,000 suit. Adrian was silent for a long moment. He took a sip of his drink. What do you suggest? I suggest you let me lead the first part of the conversation, she said boldly. Let me establish a rapport. Talk about Florence, about their family's history in the city. I've studied the patronage networks of the Renaissance. The Bocelli family sees themselves as modern-day patrons preserving a craft. We need to speak that language first. The language of finance can come later. He finally turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. You really do understand this, don't you? It wasn't a question this time. It was a statement of fact, a quiet admission. It's what I've spent the last 10 years of my life studying, she replied softly. I just never thought I'd get to use it. A flicker of something empathy perhaps crossed his face. Why did you quit? He asked. Your PhD. Kate hesitated, then told him. She told him about Leo, about the cystic fibrosis, the hospital bills, the crushing weight of it all. She spoke without self-pity, stating the facts of her life as plainly as she would state a historical date. Adrian listened without interruption. When she was finished, he just nodded slowly. I see, he said. He finished his drink, set the glass down, and went back inside without another word. The abrupt departure left Kate feeling exposed and strangely disappointed. The next morning they were driven to the Bocelli headquarters, a magnificent 16th-century palazzo in the Oltrarno district, the traditional artisan quarter of Florence. The air inside smelled of aged leather wood polish and money so old it was part of the city's foundations. They were greeted by Alessandro, and then led into a grand wood-panelled office to meet the patriarch Giovanni Bocelli. He was a man in his late 70s, with a shock of white hair, eyes as sharp and intelligent as a hawk's, and an aura of quiet, unshakable authority. He sat behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single massive piece of walnut. Robert Finch immediately stepped forward, hand outstretched, a predatory smile fixed on his face. "Signor Bocelli, a pleasure. Robert Finch, lead counsel for Crossley Holdings. We have a very strong proposal for you, one that I think you'll find exceptionally—" Giovanni Bocelli cut him off with a small, almost imperceptible raise of his hand. He ignored Finch completely and looked directly at Kate. His hawk-like eyes softened with curiosity. "Lei è la signorina Davies," he said, his voice a gravelly baritone. "The voice of reason on the telephone. My son was very impressed by you. He said you spoke of our company as a treasure of Florence." Before Finch could interject, Kate stepped forward, inclining her head respectfully. "È un onore conoscerla, signore. E sì, lo credo fermamente. Ho passato molti anni a studiare i tesori di questa città. La vostra famiglia ne è una custode. It is an honor to meet you, sir. And yes, I firmly believe it. I have spent many years studying the treasures of this city. Your family is one of its custodians." A genuine warm smile spread across Giovanni's face. He gestured to a chair. "Please sit. Tell me, what have you studied?" For the next 20 minutes, Kate and Giovanni didn't speak of business. They spoke of art. Kate mentioned her research into the Wool Merchants' Guild, the Arte della Lana, and their patronage of the Florence Cathedral. She drew a parallel between their historic role in funding Florentine art and the Bocelli family's role in preserving Florentine craft. Adrian watched, silent and fascinated. He saw the bridge being built stone by this brilliant woman he'd found serving pasta. Finch, on the other hand, was vibrating with impatience, shuffling his papers and clearing his throat. He saw this as a waste of valuable time. Finally, Giovanni turned to Adrian. "Your associate is wise, Mr. Crossley. She understands that what we do here is more than commerce." This was Adrian's cue. Guided by the foundation Kate had laid, he spoke not of acquisitions and percentages, but of partnership and preservation. He presented his vision for the apprenticeship program for using his tech empire's global reach to tell the story of Bocelli craftsmanship to a new generation. He was performing, but it was a new role, that of the thoughtful, respectful patron, not the ruthless disruptor. The meeting went better than any of them could have imagined. They didn't sign a deal, but they agreed on a framework for a partnership, one that honored the Bocelli legacy while securing its future. Giovanni seemed pleased, even energized. As they were leaving, however, Finch, unable to help himself, cornered Alessandro in the hallway. Kate was close enough to overhear. "Of course, we'll need to conduct a full audit of your workshop personnel," Finch said, in a low, conspiratorial tone. "There are always redundancies in these situations, efficiencies to be found." Alessandro's friendly demeanor vanished, replaced by a cold mask. "Our craftsmen are not redundancies, Mr. Finch. They are the company." Kate saw the damage being done. Finch's ambition and cultural blindness were actively undermining the goodwill she and Adrian had just built. As they got back into the car, Adrian was jubilant. "That was a home run he's going to sell." "No, he's not," Kate said quietly. "He's going to partner. And that partnership is in jeopardy because of your lawyer." She recounted what she had overheard. Adrian's good mood evaporated. He was silent for the entire ride back to the hotel. That evening, Kate received an email. It was from an unfamiliar address. The subject line was, "You should know who you're working for." Curious, she opened it. It contained a link to a scathing article from a well-known financial journal published a year prior. The headline read, "Crossley's Blitz: How Adrian Crossley's Hostile Takeover Gutted a 100-year-old Publishing House." The article detailed in brutal fashion how Adrian had acquired a beloved family-run publisher, fired 2/3 of the staff, sold off its most prestigious imprints, and absorbed the rest into his digital media conglomerate. The company was now a shell of its former self. The story painted a picture of the exact kind of ruthless corporate raider the Bocelli family feared. At the bottom of the email was a single anonymous line. He will do the same thing to them. He always does. Vivi's blood ran cold. Was everything Adrian had said in the meeting a lie? Was his performance, as the thoughtful patron, just that, a performance? She looked at the sender's details. There were none. But she had a sickening feeling she knew who had sent it. It was a move designed to create mistrust, to poison her against Adrian. It was the work of a serpent. It was the work of Robert Finch. He wasn't just trying to sideline her. He was actively trying to sabotage the deal's current form, to reshape it into the hostile takeover he wanted, and he was using her to do it. A knock came at her door. It was Adrian. "Walk with me," he said, his face grim. He led her not to a bar or a restaurant, but through the winding streets of Florence, across the Ponte Santa Trinita, as the sky turned a deep violet. "I spoke to Finch," he said, finally. "You were right. He doesn't get it. I've told him to stay out of all future conversations with the Bocelli family." He paused. "I also wanted to thank you. Properly. What you did in there today. It was artistry." Kate clutched her phone in her pocket, the damning article burning a hole in her conscience. Was this praise just another manipulation? "Adrian," she said, her voice tight. "That publishing house, Pen and Crown. What happened there?" He stopped walking. He looked genuinely taken aback that she knew about it. "Where did you hear about that? Does it matter? Is it true?" She pressed her heart, pounding. "Did you gut it?" Adrian's jaw tightened. He looked away out at the Arno flowing silently beneath them. "Yes," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's true. It was one of my first major acquisitions. I was younger, more aggressive. I saw assets, not people. It was a mistake. One I've regretted for a long time." He turned back to her, his eyes filled with a surprising vulnerability. "I'm not that person anymore. At least I'm trying not to be. This Bocelli deal, it's not just about the money. It's about building something, not just buying it. It's a chance to do it right." He was either the world's best actor, or he was telling the truth. Looking at him standing there under the Florentine sky, Kate found herself believing him. She also realized the true danger of Finch. He wasn't just trying to push her out. He was trying to push Adrian back into being the man he used to be. "Finch sent me the article," she said. Adrian's expression hardened into cold fury. He's trying to sabotage this," Kate said. "He wants the old Adrian, the disruptor. He doesn't want a partnership. He wants a conquest." Adrian was silent, but a grim resolution settled over his features. He understood the game Finch was playing. He understood the threat. The serpent wasn't just in the Bocelli's garden. It was inside his own company. "Tomorrow," Adrian said, his voice like ice, "we're going to finish this, and Finch is going to learn what happens when you try to poison my well." The final meeting was set for noon, the next day, back at the Bocelli Palazzo. The air in the Mercedes on the way over was thick with a tense, strategic silence. It wasn't the silence of awkwardness, but the shared quiet of two people preparing for battle. Robert Finch sat in the front passenger seat, smug and oblivious, believing he had successfully planted a seed of doubt in Vivi's mind and secured his own position. Adrian had given Kate a single instruction before they left the hotel. "Follow my lead, but if you see an opening, take it. Today we're not just closing a deal, we're setting a new precedent." They were ushered back into Giovanni Bacelli's magnificent office. The old patriarch and his son Alessandro were waiting for them. The atmosphere was cooler than the day before. Kate could feel it instantly. Finch's redundancies comment to Alessandro had done its work chilling the warmth they had previously established. Giovanni's hawk-like eyes were guarded, his smile absent. "Mr. Crossley." Giovanni began, his tone formal. "My son has informed me of a concerning conversation he had with your counsel yesterday regarding our personnel. It has given me pause." Finch, sensing an opportunity to assert his authority, stepped forward. "Signor Bacelli, if I may. In any acquisition of this scale, a certain amount of restructuring is inevitable. It's simple business logic. We identify inefficiencies, streamline operations, and maximize shareholder value. Your workshops, while charming, are overstaffed by modern standards. Our analysis suggests we could achieve the same output with 30% fewer personnel." It was a declaration of war. Finch had laid his cards on the table, directly contradicting the spirit of everything Adrian and Kate had worked to build. He was speaking to Adrian, trying to appeal to the old Crossley, the ruthless shark he knew and admired. Alessandro looked horrified. Giovanni's face was a mask of stone, his worst fears confirmed. Kate felt a surge of cold anger. This was it, the moment of sabotage. But then Adrian spoke, his voice calm and firm, cutting through Finch's poisonous rhetoric. "Robert," he said, without looking at him, "you're fired." The words dropped into the room like stones into a still pond. Robert Finch froze, his mouth slightly agape. "What, Adrian, you can't be serious. We're in the middle of a negotiation." "No, we are in a negotiation," Adrian corrected him, his gaze fixed on Giovanni. "You are an impediment. Your services are no longer required at Crossley Holdings. My security team is waiting for you at the hotel to escort you to your flight back to London. Your access has already been revoked." Finch's face went from shock to purple rage. "You're choosing her over me," he spluttered, jabbing a finger in Vivi's direction. "A waitress you met 2 days ago." "I am choosing a new way of doing business," Adrian said, his voice like steel. "A way that you are incapable of understanding. Now get out." Humiliated and seething, Finch snatched his briefcase and stormed out of the room, slamming the heavy oak door behind him. An astonished silence fell. Giovanni and Alessandro stared at Adrian, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning respect. Adrian had just excised the serpent in front of their very eyes. It was a powerful definitive statement. Adrian turned back to them, his demeanor completely changed. The corporate armor was gone. "Signor Bacelli, please accept my profound apology. Mr. Finch represented a philosophy that I am actively trying to move my company away from. He does not speak for me." He then looked at Kate. It was the cue. The opening. Kate took a deep breath. This was her moment, not just to save the deal, but to transform it into something truly remarkable. "Signor Bacelli," she began, her voice resonating with passion and academic authority. "Mr. Finch spoke of inefficiencies. I see mastery. He spoke of redundancies. I see lineage. Berzessoir." For centuries, the great families of Florence, the Medici, the Strozzi, the Pitti, understood that their greatest legacy was not the wealth they accumulated, but the culture they cultivated. They didn't just sponsor artists. They invested in the ecosystem of craft that made Florence the center of the world. They created workshops, funded apprenticeships, and preserved skills. She walked over to the large window that overlooked a courtyard, where artisans could be seen cutting and stitching leather. "That," she said, gesturing towards them, "is not a liability on a balance sheet. That is the living heart of the Bacelli brand. It is your soul, as Alessandro said. And you are right, It is not for sale. She turned back to them. So we are proposing something different. Not an acquisition, a true partnership, a new foundation. The Bacelli-Crossley Foundation for Italian Craftsmanship. She outlined the idea that had been forming in her mind since her conversation with Adrian on the bridge. Crossley Holdings would provide a massive capital injection, not to buy a majority stake, but to fund the foundation. The foundation's mandate would be twofold. First, to modernize Bacelli's logistics marketing and global distribution using Crossley's tech expertise. Second, and more importantly, to protect and expand the artisanal workshops. They would double the number of apprenticeships, build a state-of-the-art training facility, and create a digital archive to preserve the unique techniques of the Bacelli masters for posterity. The Bacelli family would retain 51% ownership, Kate concluded. You would remain custodians of your legacy. Mr. Crossley would be your partner in carrying that legacy into the future. You are not selling your company. You are ensuring its immortality. It was a checkmate. It was a proposal so perfectly tailored to the Bacelli's values, so respectful of their history, and so innovative in its structure that it left them speechless. It wasn't about taking over. It was about building up. It used Adrian's strengths, capital, and technology to protect their strengths, craft, and heritage. Giovanni Bacelli stood up slowly. He walked over to Kate, his eyes shining with an emotion she couldn't quite decipher. He took her hand in both of his. Lei ha l'anima di una Fiorentina, Signorina Davies, he said softly. You have the soul of a Florentine, Miss Davies. He then turned to Adrian, a broad, genuine smile spreading across his face. Mr. Crossley, you have found yourself the most remarkable advisor I have ever met. We accept your proposal. The relief and triumph in the room were immense. Hands were shaken. Espresso was ordered. The tension dissolved into a shared, buzzing excitement for the future. As they left the palazzo and stepped into the bright Tuscan sun, Adrian was quiet for a long time. Director of Cultural Liaisons doesn't seem like the right title, he said as the car pulled away. That was the work of a CEO. Kate laughed, the sound light and free. I'll settle for finishing my PhD. We can arrange that, Adrian said, a serious note in his voice. The foundation can sponsor it, but I'm still offering you a full-time job, a real one. Help me build this. Help me find other companies like Bacelli. Help me change the way Crossley Holdings does business. He looked at her, his usual confidence tempered with a genuine plea. I can't do it without you, Kate. 2 weeks later, Kate was back in New York. She sat not in her cramped apartment, but in a spacious, light-filled office on the 50th floor of the Crossley Holdings Tower. A breathtaking view of Central Park spread before her. Her official title was Head of Legacy Partnerships. Her first act had been to use her signing bonus to pay off all of Leo's outstanding medical bills and move them into a larger apartment with a better air filtration system. An email pinged on her new computer. It was from Adrian. Subject: an update. The body of the email contained a single link to a patient portal for a top cystic fibrosis specialist at Johns Hopkins. A consultation for Leo had been scheduled and paid for. Tears welled in Vivi's eyes. It wasn't about the money. It was about the quiet, deliberate act of care. The man who had once been unable to see the person right in front of him had gone out of his way to care for the most important person in her life. A moment later, Adrian appeared in her doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this, he said, handing one to her. Big day. Thank you, Adrian, she said, her voice thick with emotion. For everything. He simply nodded, understanding what she meant. Get used to it, Davies. He said, a rare, easy smile on his face. We're partners now. We've got a world to build." Kate looked from his face to the view from her window. Her life of clattering silverware and invisibility felt like a distant dream. She had found her voice in a quiet restaurant, and in doing so had not only changed her own life and her brother's, but had set in motion the transformation of a billionaire. She had proven that understanding is a currency more valuable than gold, and that respect is the soundest investment of all. The future, like the city below, was vast and full of possibility, and so a single sentence in Italian, spoken at the right moment, didn't just stun a billionaire, it reshaped his entire world. The story of Vivian Davies and Adrian Crossley is a powerful reminder that we should never judge a person by their job title or their circumstances. True value and intelligence are often hidden in the quietest corners, waiting for a chance to be seen. It shows us that empathy and understanding aren't soft skills. They are superpowers that can close deals, build empires, and even change hearts. It's a testament to the idea that the most profound connections are made when we stop talking and finally start to listen. What did you think of Vivi's incredible journey? Let us know in the comments below. If this story moved you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that will inspire and amaze you. Thank you for listening.